On Saturday, the 31st of August, NaNoWriMo made a statement calling the widespread condemnation of AI amongst the writing community to be classist and ableist. And unsurprisingly, this went over poorly. Very, very poorly. I'm going to explain everything that they said and respond to it, and they made a really bad statement, but first let's just add some context if you're unfamiliar with anything involved. So, NaNoWriMo. This is the National Novel Writing Month. It was once a small group of, just writers hanging out that eventually evolved into a large nonprofit. It offers both a community for writers and outreach to creative writing education in schools. They've grown a lot. The goal of NaNo is to write a 50,000 word book in 1 month, November specifically, though it's become more of a flexible goal over time, and they have other things throughout the year beyond just NaNo at this point. The idea is simply to write, not worrying about quality or editing until it's all out on the page. NaNo has been around for about 20 years at this point, and I've always been a big fan. I started doing it when I was in middle school, as did my friends. Doing NaNo is what got me to finish my first ever manuscripts, and it kept me writing every year. I became a better writer because NaNo offered me structure and a fun, competitive atmosphere. I remember one year writing 10K on the very first day, early in the morning, and the joy of just waiting for my friend to find out and be just horrified by how much I'd managed to get in one day. I think that NaNo is a good idea, especially for young writers. The end result of your 50K month effort book probably isn't going to be very good, but that's okay, that's not the point. You still wrote a book and it can be edited, rewritten, retackled later. It's just about the writing process. Now, AI. In the original letter to come that NaNo posted, they didn't actually make a distinction about what they meant by AI. In an update that was posted on the 2nd of September, they added, and this is a quote, "AI is a large umbrella technology, and that the size and complexity of that category, which includes both non-generative and generative AI, among other uses, contributes to our belief that it is simply too big to categorically endorse or not endorse." And this is entirely true. Since the rise of GenAI, the language around AI has gotten really muddled. Artificial intelligence has been used for a very long time to refer to a lot of things. Any sort of complex logic program can be like an AI. It's what controls video game monsters, and also what tries to spell check your documents. Well, previously has been what has been doing that. Generative AI has become the common term for what people are objecting to and are object to in general. ChatGPT is similar to your phone's auto-predict. It's an example of GenAI, but instead of a small dataset, it has scraped the entire internet. This makes it better at predicting what words go in what order. When it comes to generating larger swaths of text, it's prone to regurgitating whatever determines is most correct. It doesn't have the ability to comprehend what is and isn't correct, only what is most likely to go in what order, approximately. There are a number of immediate ethical pits that generative AI is just stuck in. And I'm not here to explain it all in full, and there's just plenty I'm not covering or not going to bring up. That's because I'm mostly here to talk about NaNo, but I want to give an overview. But a couple examples of problems of generative AI. It uses copyrighted, personal, and in general information no one consented to give, and it uses that for profit. It is currently heavily being used and forced down everyone's throats because every tech company obviously invested in it and is just desperate for dividends. It's being pushed to replace the jobs of artists and writers. It is extremely expensive to operate, and it does a worse job than the tools that came before it. It has a huge and mostly untold at this point environmental toil. It is a tool that, again, is being used to remove as many humans as possible from jobs while creating none. All because it makes things marginally cheaper for the rich people who fund it and profit it. And, by the way, a fun fact. Do you know who sponsors NaNoWriMo right now? One of their 3 sponsors is Pro Writing Aid, an AI writing tool that offers spell check, rewriting, tone adjustment, and text generation. We might return to that. So, AI and NaNo, what they said. It's a kind of a short statement, so we're gonna just look at it in full. We believe that to categorically condemn AI would be to ignore classist and ableist issues surrounding the use of the technology, and that questions around the use of AI tie to questions around privilege. Privilege is quite the swing. I mean, one might call it privilege, for example, to cause unknown environmental damage because you can't be bothered to write your own emails. Classism. Not all writers have the financial ability to hire humans to help at certain phases of their writing. True, but most writers don't need to hire humans. NaNoWriMo is done by writers of all skill and career levels, but it's always been heavily for hobbyists. It's about writing for the love of writing to just get it out of you and get started. You can hire someone to edit and read over your work at any point, sure, but likely the few people concerned with hiring human help are those aiming to self-publish, and it's not that relevant to Nano itself. For some writers, the decision to use AI is a practical, not an ideological one. The financial ability to engage a human for feedback and review assumes a level of privilege that not all community members possess. Calling AI anti-classist because it saves on an editor is confusingly irrelevant to NaNoWriMo, but notably relevant to the AI sponsor Pro Writing Aid. And it's not even going to do a good job at editing. GenAI is just a wretched writer at the moment, and it certainly doesn't have the tools for proper feedback. The best feedback is able to offer you insight into the reader's experiences, what interpretations and ideas another human comes up with when experiencing their work. Humans bring memories, associations, and opinions to whatever, you're presenting them, which an AI tool of any kind can't offer, including GenAI. Even when the technology inevitably improves, because it will, it's a broad, people-pleasing dataset which can't offer opinions of its own. One of the joys of opinions from humans is that they can be wrong. An AI is only going to just repeat what it says, believe that it's correct, and can't really think about what it's saying or why. Nor can you in response to the feedback you receive. Not everybody has a writing buddy, which is the other point Nano is making. But again, I find it bizarre that NaNoWriMo spins this into a money thing. It's not a matter of classism if you don't have any friends who want to read your creative writing. It is, sure, when it comes to wanting professional editing. But the thing is that Nano is well known for being a place where writers meet up, exchange work, and find beta readers for free. Not everyone has access to a human who can offer feedback and reviews. But you guys at Nano have been directly responsible for helping people form writing groups and workshop sessions and beta reading exchanges for decades now. Nano has a July program, or at least had, called Camp NaNoWriMo, where it used to be, you were paired up in a couple, random users who were kind of doing the same genre into a so-called cabin, which had, a shared private chat. And the one year I did that, I made multiple lasting friendships that exceeded out of NaNoWriMo and were also fantastic beta readers. This is something that Nano already is addressing and has nothing to do with classism. The answer to not everyone has a friend who can edit isn't, so we made a horrible robot. It's, so we help people make real friends. Ableism. Not all brains have same abilities, and not all writers function at the same level of education or proficiency in the language in which they are writing. Some brains and ability levels require outside help or accommodations to achieve certain goals. Here's where the use of GenAI and AI being muddled is a real problem. Having a spell check pick up on awkward phrasings, poor word choice, or otherwise help you communicate in another language is fine, or communicate at all. If someone needs help replying to a text and finds ChatGPT, asking it for suggestions helpful, that's okay. I'm not going to morally shame people who use the tools that are being forced on us, tools that can be fun to play with or help with basic tasks. I will, though, suggest that the ethical price of GenAI does not outweigh this benefit, especially when the tools they speak of already exist, often in better forms. If you need help replying to a text, there are numerous guides out there on the internet. In fact, it's those exact guides ChatGPT scraped and is trying to regurgitate at you. There are tools for grammar and spelling which do not need to write or rewrite or process your messages to fix them. Not fully. A spell checker will, even when inaccurate, try to tell you what it thinks is wrong. It might go American spelling, or, this word choice is poor. It might be wrong, it often is, but at least if you have an idea of what it is picking up on, what it thinks is wrong, you could learn from this. When you put text in and ask a program to just make it better, how does it become better? What has changed, and what impact does that have? What is better? How can you learn to write better input if you simply trust the output will eventually be correct? How can you learn to write if you don't actually write? The notion that all writers should be able to perform certain functions independently is a position that we agree with wholeheartedly. There is a wealth of reasons why individuals can't see the issues in their writing without help. This whole letter is rather vague, isn't it? Like, what notion are they talking about here? What discourse have I missed? People have been shouting about the correct way to write for as long as there has been writing. Language constantly evolves, and fiction does too. My advice for writing is to write until you know all the rules, and then write until you learn how to break them. What a writer should perform to be a writer is write. That's all. If it's good is another question, but it also isn't the point. Writing is about expression and imagination and art, and sometimes other people like it too. This, again, still part of the ableism section, feels notably focused on editing more than anything else. AI is anti-classist because it's cheaper than hiring an editor. AI is anti-ableist because it can edit. So far, they haven't actually said, let AI write your book for you, but let AI edit your book for you. And, I wonder if there's any, AI-based editing tools out there that they'd suggest. I have to wonder. The ableism angle feels half-baked into their argument here. Can a disabled person find a GenAI tool helpful to their writing? Sure, anything's possible. Is GenAI some savior which finally evens out the playing field for the disabled? God, no. There are already tools different from GenAI which can help people who have certain issues they have to overcome. There are groups and programs like NaNoWriMo itself which offer various types of supports. There are also just tons of books and art pieces by disabled people of all sorts, made with no aid at all. It's very weird of them to come at this and be like, we're helping with ableism with this editing thing. Like, this is something that has been a long-standing issue. As much as something can help, I'm just being frustrated by them. Continuing. General access issues. All of these considerations exist within a larger system in which writers don't always have equal access to resources along the chain. For example, underrepresented minorities are less likely to be offered traditional publishing contracts, which places some, by default, into the indie author space, which inequitably creates upfront cost burdens that authors who do not suffer from systemic discrimination may have to incur. This whole statement boggles the mind. Like, I want to grab NaNoWriMo by the shoulders, they do have shoulders, and just start, shaking them. Like, what are you guys talking about? Yes, this is true. Publishing is still extremely white, cis, het. Stories and authors who are not these things are less likely to be contracted and less of them are published. But that doesn't place some by default into the indie author space. Being self-published is a choice, not a second-place ribbon. As much as we can discuss the unfair opportunities that the publishing industry affords to Alex Astor, being professionally published isn't a universal human right. Agents and editors sort through hundreds of people trying to pitch their novels every single day. The people responsible for picking what gets published may be influenced by their biases, but the vast majority of people who try to get mainstream published simply won't be. And that isn't a reflection as much on the industry as much as some people being overall less likely is. What I'm saying is that the implication of Nano's statement here is that some minority authors stand no chance in the mainstream and are thus forced to self-publish, which costs money. So AI is good because it saves on... Wait, is this yet another point on how AI is good because it can edit your book for you? AI can't format your book for digital and publishing. It can't arrange and check your files for fidelity. It can't do your layout. But it can make you a bad cover, and it can do a really bad job editing. As somebody who is an indie author in two different ways, I also find it really telling NaNo's statement uses the term so generally. They're talking about self-publishing very clearly here, but use indie author, which also applies to people published through small presses. Again, the term indie author applies to both, but they're talking about self-publishing. My first book was through a small LGBT plus YA press, because it indeed felt too niche for the mainstream. I wasn't pushed down there because of unfair situation. I chose it. They're implying it's a lesser thing. I had 3 rounds of professional editing and a professional cover done for free, and I was also paid a couple $100 on top. When I self-published my duology, it was also a choice, and it cost me a couple $100. The cost was something I knew I was putting in and likely wouldn't ever see returned. This is the case for the vast majority of self-publishing and a lot of small press books too. There's less buyers, so there's less profit to go around unless you get lucky. This is, secretly and not so secretly, the case of mainstream publishing too. Books aren't very profitable unless you get lucky. The big 5 publishers are mostly held up by the huge keystone authors, and everybody else is just, they're hoping they get lucky. There is something to be said about how many Ivy League, Oxbridge white women we give thousands of dollars in advances to, versus minority authors having to pay out of pocket for any form of publishing and even things like promotion and marketing. NaNoWriMo, though, isn't saying it well enough and seems to think GenAI might help, when all GenAI has done, so far, is flood the market with AI books, which further damage the little respect that indie authors currently have. Beyond that, we see value in sharing resources and information about AI and any emerging technology issue or discussion that is relevant to the writing community as a whole. It's healthy for writers to be curious about what's new and forthcoming and what might impact their career space or their pursuit of the craft. Our events, with a connection to AI, have been extremely well attended, further proof that this programming is serving RIMOs who want to know more. This is such a defensive statement, isn't it? AI and emerging technology should be discussed, explored, and understood. I'm not surprised a lot of people are going to them. They have an interesting tone of, though, reminding you, our events have been extremely well attended, further proof that this is important. Yes, I think talking about it is important, not endorsing it. Well, sorry, they clearly don't endorse it, but we'll get there later. Before GenAI hit the mainstream, I was an avid follower of generative AI news because it's a fascinating subject, especially in regards to how GenAI works, makes decisions, and especially the places it gets stuck. My favorite blog I'm going to recommend is Janelle Shane's AI Weirdness, where for many years she's experimented and had fun with generative AI while also providing information on how it works, where it goes wrong, its strengths and its weaknesses. I will link to her website in the description below, and in particular, I'm going to start with an article about the inborn bias that exists in AI writing detectors and analyzers. For those reasons, we absolutely do not condemn AI, and we recognize and respect writers who believe that AI tools are right for them. We recognize that some members of our community stand staunchly against AI for themselves, and that's perfectly fine. As individuals, we have the freedom to make our own decisions. They then go out of the way here to say they don't condemn AI, which feels like a coward's way out. They clearly are pro-AI, considering they came in here with a list of ridiculous points in order to argue AI wasn't just a neutral tool that some people like, but an actively beneficial tool to people through the veneer of social justice. They are attempting to frame the condemnation of AI as a classist, ableist, unfair thing, while never saying until the edit that they mean AI as a concept rather than GenAI. And even then, never getting particularly specific about what they're talking about. Look, if people want to use AI tools to edit or write or brainstorm, I can't stop them. As individuals, we do have the freedom to make our own decisions. Except when it comes to having everything you've ever written online be sold off for data processing so a machine can replace you and save a CEO some pennies. But we have rights as individuals, don't we? And so if someone wants to do it, I can't stop them. But NaNoWriMo didn't say that AI was a neutral thing that could be helpful to some people. They actually said that last year in 2023 with a blog called Am I Allowed to Use AI? And in that, this was their opinion. The goal of participating in NaNoWriMo is to motivate yourself to write and give yourself space to develop your creativity. Winning is a personal achievement and has always been based on the honor system. If using AI will assist your creative processes, you are welcome to use it. Using ChatGPT to write your entire novel would defeat the purpose of the challenge, though. This does make it more of a hard curve for them to change their stance from, we can't stop you, but don't use it for your whole book, to, if you're against AI, you're being privileged and discriminatory. It's so, as a veteran of it, 2014 Tumblr of them, to tell me to check my privilege. And just like then, it co-opts the language of social justice to make a poor argument that weakens the meanings of the words used. What bothers me broadly is the implication of encouraging tools like GenAI onto young creative writers. Nano hasn't advocated for letting ChatGPT write your book for you, but it's also blurry where the line ends with corrective editing software suggestion. If it rewrites my writing, how much of the result truly is mine? But also, more importantly, how am I going to improve? I said it a little, I'm gonna say it again. To write is to learn how to write. If you're learning English, you will get better by practicing, picking up on countless invisible rules of the language as you go. You learn from mistakes and things that don't sound quite right, and you learn to make them sound better. This is true if English is your first language as well. This is true if you're writing in any language. The power of NaNoWriMo has always been that manic free sprint to the end, just writing for the sake of writing, exploring your ideas and seeing what mess is left at the end. Everyone has a style of writing and plotting and imagining that works best for them, and there are ways AI and GenAI could assist there. Maybe you're stuck in a plot hole and GenAI could take the details provided and give you a more specific list of ideas. They'll probably suck, but it might kickstart your brain into something better. You also could talk to people about it in the writing community. You also could talk to friends or family. You could look for writing advice forums and find contrasting opinions. You could go for a walk. It isn't so much a problem to me of using GenAI for shortcuts so much as it is becoming reliant on the dubious ease of them rather than using your own brain and instincts. Writers develop unique styles over time, quirks and tendencies of both plot and prose that equally might repulse and turn on readers. Tastes change. If you do a writer's workshop, you'll exchange work with writers of different tastes and styles whose advice you can discuss, think critically about, and decide what to do with. All of this feedback is from humans coming into your work from unique perspectives. Even someone who failed to understand your short story can provide useful feedback because you can pick at where you lost them. The choice to ignore bad feedback because the person who gave it is just plain wrong is also a powerful one. It's a conversation thing. It makes you think about writing more. Gen AI and AI correction just can't replace that. It comes from a place of vague authority. Let me make your text better. You aren't learning, though. You're being corrected, and you don't even have the tools to think critically about why, and what better even is. Out of curiosity, I thought I'd check out the current state of GenAI editing and explore what ChatGPT thinks of my writing and what I think of its editing. This is just kind of a silly little project, but I was thinking about all this and I thought I'd check it out. I decided to ask, can you edit this text to make it better and explain the changes you made? I wanted to do something simple, effective, and kind of, like somebody being a bit lazy, just kind of writing, I need to make this paragraph better, and explain why. I submitted 2 pieces of writing, so something I wrote as a youth for NaNoWriMo, and my highly stylized artsy current project. So I'm going to start with something I wrote in 4th grade. It was my first ever serious writing project. It's about a snow leopard cub who, accidentally throws his sister off a cliff. It's fine, though, because she gets turned into a robot. So we're going to start with the original text. Miles dashed towards his sister, each step closer to saving her life. The cliff was a straight fall for about 800 paw steps, 4 paw steps equals 1 foot, before turning into a slope. And as Miles thought about the fall, he realized she might survive if there were branches or something else to catch her fall. Miles reached his sister, but even then, it was too late. Miles watched his sister fall down and down and down and down. As she fell, the cliff bent in, and Miles didn't see how she landed, but he wouldn't want to know. Now feeling quite sick in the stomach, Miles lay down and rested a quiet, dreamless sleep of sorrow. Miles woke up with a start of optimism that soon depleted once he recalled the sad experience that occurred before he slept, and continued to sulk silently as the day progressed. His mother would come back, of course, and of course would wonder where Onipa was. But Miles knew not what would happen to him when his mother found out about Miles basically murdering Onipa. Miles stared blankly ahead when he heard a yowl that sounded like Onipa, but Miles knew he was going insane. Onipa was dead, lifeless, deceased, and Miles knew that no matter how much he thought about how she could be alive, it always ended up with the same results. Onipa was dead. I was struggling to find a good example of my old writing, and I thought this was the best. And I'm realizing it's quite a reflection on, this is just what it's like when you're 10. ChatGPT, I'm not going to read the full revision. I will be putting it on screen because I think that you don't need to hear me doing it. ChatGPT's revision is an improvement, technically, but it's not a good edit. The changes are extremely slight. I agree with most of them, but they feel lateral more than better. A couple words are placed or moved around. You can feel the lack of critical thought involved in these choices because this machine is not capable of critical thought. So take this bit from the original. Miles watched his sister fall down and down and down and down. As she fell, the cliff bent in and Miles didn't see how she landed, but he wouldn't want to know. ChatGPT explains how it revised this under the heading Emotional Impact. Rephrased, Miles watched his sister fall down and down and down, to Miles watched in horror as his sister plummeted down, 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 to emphasize the emotional weight. Adjusted, the cliff bent in and Miles didn't see how she landed, but he wouldn't want to know. 2. The cliff bent inward, obscuring his view of her landing. He didn't want to know how she landed, for better readability and emotional resonance. I'm not saying the original is good writing, but it's bad writing that's easy to improve. ChatGPT just can't do that. The down and down and down and down bit from the original, it's improper grammar, but better than adding an explicit mention of Miles feeling horror. He just threw his sister off a cliff, that's a given. Similarly, the awkward fragment of, but he wouldn't want to know, is so much more impactful than he didn't want to know how she landed. It reflects the emotional state of the character, where ChatGPT is sure that you need it spelled out explicitly and simply. The reasoning provided just isn't helpful either. ChatGPT asserts its changes are good. They're for readability and impact. It sounds professional, it sounds proper, it has no meaning. It makes it easy to trust that it's saying, this makes it more readability and impact. But if you don't have the actual writing experience to say, is this actually adding impact, you're just believing it and it's telling you something wrong. It keeps this attitude even when a number of its edits are just incorrect, not reflected in the text above, or just repeating itself. If somebody just isn't thinking, they're just going to believe that this is right. If somebody lacks the trained skill of identifying good writing, they're not going to be good at identifying bad writing either. Another change. Changed when his mother found out about Miles basically murdering Onipa, to when she found out he had essentially caused Onipa's death, to convey guilt without overly harsh language. The way ChatGPT edits and writes is empty. This isn't about enhancing the mood or emotions or language choice, it doesn't know what those are. This is a flag that the word basically murdering is a bit inappropriate. Like my weird 10-year-old story needs to be configured to better suit social media guidelines. Pretty much all of my childhood writing was about scary monsters and tortured lab experiments, and it sucked. But I got better. If I used a tool that constantly told me how I should write, how I could better reword things to its standards, that gave me the tools for tone and ways to remove as much labor from the process as possible, it's impossible to say what impact it would have had. but I don't think it would have encouraged me to work harder, better, or more critically. ChatGPT's dedication to bland craft made me curious to see what it makes of something more experimental, so I gave it a bit of Creatures of Heaven, which is my current hyper-specific fanfiction / webcomic project. I've been in the pits. Yet I would be punished by you setting. I would be punished by knowing you had sinned and I had lived, the messenger says. Her feet twitch and he twirls her again, spins her restless blood and spurs it too quiet. You are fretful and blameless, he soothes. Is there a smile to him? Is there a laugh? And your fears assign such states. See how I have shaped the earth. Is it a sin? Is it a shame? It is youthful smoke. Am I a sinner? You are not. She should not have invoked that word. I would rather sin. I would rather be a sinner. He takes a hand. He allows her claws. For a moment they whirl, a tumultuous dance. He heats every part of her, and her heart is beating at the wrong tempo. Too fast in his embrace, too loud in the silence, too much for her station, too obvious, too wanting, too much. It can be done, he says, if that is so. She doesn't dare speak. As before, the edits and insights ChatGPT offers are minimal to none. Mostly, it swaps out a few words and makes direct artistic choices actively weaker. For example, enhance character voice. Adjusted, is there a smile to him? Is there a laugh? To perhaps of a smile, perhaps of a laugh. To create a smoother, more introspective tone. It doesn't though, does it? It says it does, it sounds about right, but it takes the internal doubts of the messenger and makes them external. She's searching for something she hopes is there, trying to convince herself. The edit makes it sound like she's just trying to parse a difficult facial expression. It flattens a rhetorical to please an unknown rubric, and can't offer me any justification besides this is smoother. When you disagree with an editor, you can talk about it. If you ask GenAI to explain, it can't, but it will look for an answer it thinks will make you happy. Adjusted, he allows her clause, to he permits her clause, for a subtler sense of control. ChatGPT was, I think, flummoxed by the slightly unusual style of the writing and just couldn't parse what was going on. Compared to my 4th grade writing, it only makes a few changes and most are word replacements that have no real impact. Permits isn't more subtle, but ChatGPT knows I asked for an explanation, and those are the words it thinks it should go together. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but I just want to make it clear. It sucks. What I'm getting at in this write-up that really was only meant to take like an hour this morning and has not, is that GenAI is a tool that isn't very good at its job yet. But even when it becomes better, it can't replace human editing, writing, or feedback. What makes good art is the human experience that goes into it and comes out of it and that exists on every step of the way, whether it's made by a professional team or a 13-year-old on Wattpad. There are many ways that AI and GenAI can be used to help people create art, but the way these tools are being pushed right now is heavy with emphasis on replacing labor rather than enhancing it. Where they operate is from a place of this unearned smugness, a certain monopolistic idea of the future. Why do anything when anything can be done by GenAI? Why think? Why try? Hit the rewrite button a few times until you're happy, and pay us money for it. We bought your dead relative's blog and fed it to the machine. Pay us money for it. We bought every word you posted in line in 2010. Let's use it to write recipes and summaries and emails and novels and movies. You need this. Buy it. I'm not a cynical person. I'm not, even though I know I do like a book review channel about bad books, but I'm not actually cynical. I'm in it for the love of the game, but man. The issues of GenAI are just far more expansive than even this one corner, and this one corner is not a happy one. I'm a big fan of, while I'm throwing recommendations out, 404 Media for their excellent reporting on tech and AI, and that's actually where I first heard about this Nano story. As much as there can be any use for GenAI, which, sure, there is, we also just need to ask ourselves if it's worth it for all of the negatives. Every tech company has gone hog wild on GenAI, trying to integrate it everywhere for tasks it isn't ready for, and then raising the price of their products because of this, because it costs them so much, they want to take it out on us. At the same time, GenAI is flooding the web with misinformation and deepfakes, which will only increase in realism. GenAI might be cheaper than hiring humans, but the unregulated, widespread access to it has led to a surge of non-consensual nude images being generated and spread online, and in schools, including and especially of children. It's not something people talk about that much for obvious reasons, but it's a huge problem. It is built on stolen words and images, and it's an environmental nightmare on top of it. Is that worth a slightly more advanced auto-reply email? Is this something that is a net good? Do we want this? I don't.